EF20 Online is sponsored by the Climate Council of Greater Kansas City and KKFI 90.1 FM, Kansas City Community Radio. Please welcome your hosts, Kristan Chamberlain and Heather Navarez.
Part of the EF20 conference this year. So my name is Kristan Chamberlain. I'm the Executive Director of KC-CAN.
And I'm Heather Navarez, the Director of Operations.
And we'd like to just give you a quick look at the agenda this afternoon, what we're hoping to cover. Not a whole lot of time, but first we'd like to provide you with a just a short background overview of our organization, what we do. We'd like to explore the question of environmental justice. What is environmental justice? And really pin down some of these things to our local environment as well. So we'd like to look at forecasting, what the forecasting climate issues look like here in Kansas City, the impacts of those climate issues, and then who the vulnerable populations are that will be most impacted. And then ultimately, we'd like to talk a little bit about our model and how we're hoping to balance these scales and bring some equity and social justice to the community here. If you have questions during the presentation, I think in this context, it's probably easiest just to type them in the question and answer box on the side. And then at the end, we'll try and leave some time to address those when we get there. So we'd like to start with a quote that really, I think, beautifully articulates how we envision some of the issues at hand here in terms of the environment and social justice issues. It's a quote by Pope Francis from 2018. He says, "We are faced not with two separate crises, one environmental and the other social, but rather one complex crisis, which is both social and environmental. Strategies for solution demand an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time, protecting nature." So for our background, KC-CAN was conceived in partnership with Shelter KC, which is a men and women's homeless shelter in downtown Kansas City. It was formerly called Kansas City Rescue Mission. They just recently rebranded as Shelter KC. In late 2017, I met the then director, Joe Colaizzi, who was interested in developing an enterprise that would generate income for the rescue mission, for their programs, but also provide jobs for the men and women transitioning out of their programs. So I was really excited about the project. I jumped in with 2 feet, but very quickly began to uncover the barriers that this population was facing in terms of employment. So the 3 industries that were rising in terms of employment and steady opportunity for this group of people were the medical, tech, and food industry, food service industries. That was pre-COVID, so obviously there's some instability now, but those were pretty steady places. Unfortunately for this vulnerable population that we were trying to work with, you know, many of them had criminal records, which excluded them from medical type positions. There's serious educational deficits. People who have not completed high school and even younger than that, not completing school. And then so many of this vulnerable group is dealing with PTSD or other types of mental illnesses. So the composite group or sketch of that really led us into the green industry. And what we were seeing is that green jobs in many ways provided a range of opportunity for people with educational deficits. It didn't exclude people with criminal records. and more than anything, it provided a really safe and almost therapeutic environment for people to work and continue their recovery process. So we identified an opportunity in commercial composting, kind of a middle market, and fast forward 2 years to today, and we've really got an amazing service up and running for the community.
So to springboard off of that, we currently have one vehicle that's outfitted with a specially designed food waste collection unit. It has an 8-yard capacity, which holds about 6,000 pounds of food waste. Those are 2 of our board members with our truck there. And then picture to the right is one of our 64-gallon Casey cans. And since beginning service last May, we've diverted 75 tons of food waste from the landfill to be turned into compost. We service a variety of businesses. That includes restaurants and coffee shops, museums, architecture and design firms, schools, kombucha tea and beer breweries. We have high-rise apartments and retirement facilities and others. So a lot of different businesses out there. We currently only pick up on the Missouri side, but that includes North Kansas City, West Bottoms, downtown, Crossroads, and the Plaza. And then we also travel as far south as Lee Summit and as far east as Blue Springs. But we do hope to begin service on the Kansas side later this year. So moving forward, we have a short video that was created by NRDC, and that briefly describes what environmental justice is and what it means.
Environmental justice really reflects the fundamental reality that vulnerable communities are all too often subject to the disproportionate burden of pollution and contamination. At the end of the day, when we're talking about environmental impacts, at the heart of it are real people's lives. And if you think about one child who's in her home that maybe has lead paint on the walls, she's drinking water from the tap that might have lead contamination in it. She plays in a playground that has arsenic in the soil and is developing asthma because of the polluting facilities next door. She goes into her school that has mold inside. These are real things that happen on an everyday basis. Not everybody has the ability to simply uproot themselves from a community where they've lived for decades, where their families raise them, where they raise their children. People don't have the financial mobility necessarily to simply get up and go. How do we combat environmental injustice? There are things like litigation. That means continue fighting in the courts, continue fighting to strengthen existing legislation, fighting to ensure that existing legislation is actually being enforced. Things like community organizing, public education, mobilizing the base, and elevating voices. There's also things like using media as an outlet to get your point across. In today's day and age, especially with this administration, I think there are an enormous amount of hurdles in how to address environmental injustices. But the reality is we have to keep fighting. Great gains do not occur overnight. They take sometimes decades. I truly believe that environmental justice is the modern day civil rights issue of our time.
So jumping back in, environmental justice addresses issues such as social, economic, and political marginalization of minorities and low-income populations. Although these issues may take many forms, like inadequate access to healthy food, air and water pollution, placement of industrial sites, lead poisoning, and other issues, our conversation today will focus on environmental justice issues specifically arising from climate change.
So in order to provide context for today, we really wanted to ground the presentation in local information and data, and look at how that specific local information impacts our community, Kansas City, but in social justice arena. So according to some sources, Kansas City is predicted to be the 5th most impacted city of all major cities nationwide by climate change. So that, of course, means that our vulnerable populations are going to suffer the consequences of this. So the publication you see on the right-hand side of the screen there was published by Division of Health and Promotion in 2018. It provides a really comprehensive and current overview of some of these climate predictions and the direct impact these changes are going to have in our community here in Kansas City. It's a great resource we can provide after the presentation if anyone's interested. But essentially, according to this research, what we can expect to see is not surprising in the next few years. Is we're going to see an increase in the average annual temperatures, an increase in days with temperatures reaching over 105, and an increase in the number of consecutive days without precipitation.
So other key findings for local impact include an increase in the number of days of heavy precipitation and a decrease in the number of cold days overall in the area. And here is a photo of the flooding that took place along Indian Creek in Kansas City in the summer of 2017. This was near 435 and I believe Warnell Road. And you can see that there are a whole bunch of cars just underwater along that street and some pretty serious damage. So the weather events can be quite significant. So we've been talking about what the impacts are, but what does that mean for our health and other items? Keep in mind these impacts will disproportionately and more severely affect economically and politically marginalized minority and low-income populations. So this is not a comprehensive list, but there will be more extreme heat events that will likely increase the risk of heat-related illnesses, like heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and possibly death. Warmer average temperatures and higher levels of precipitation could result in more cases of vector-borne illnesses from like mosquitoes, fleas, and ticks, as well as foodborne and waterborne illnesses. For instance, flooding and runoff can spread sewage, chemicals, and disease agents. Increased temperatures and changes in wind circulation lead to reduced air quality. Precipitation extremes, like the flooding we just saw, or drought on the other side of it, those can result in injuries and deaths, population displacement, mental health problems, and water quality issues. And then decreased agricultural productivity driven by climate change could lead to food insecurity, reduced food quality, as well as malnutrition.
So who's going to bear the brunt of some of that? Who's the most vulnerable here in Kansas City? And the list is really not probably surprising to any of you. We're going to see the most vulnerable in populations of people over 65. Children are going to bear the brunt. People with chronic conditions, both mental and physical conditions. People with low socioeconomic status, as well as our communities of color. And I think what's interesting here, it's not interesting, it's really tragic. We're seeing this play out right now on an international, global stage with coronavirus. So we are seeing this, vulnerable population list being very, very hard hit. And I think there's so many lessons we can learn from that, from this horrible circumstance we're in right now, but taking it forward and really learning some lessons about how to combat some of this. Here locally, what we're looking at is a social vulnerability map of Jackson County. So what we know from this map is that we definitely have vulnerable populations you can see in the darker blue who are going to need additional services in these crises, whether they're health, weather, whatever. They're going to need help before the event, after the event, during the event. Jackson County currently ranks in the middle for overall social vulnerability index, which essentially indicates that we have more vulnerability than over half of the counties in Missouri right now. And according to this map here, those vulnerabilities really center in Kansas City, Raytown, and Grandview. That's according to I think it was a 2018 probably census. It might say up there on the map there. But anyhow, it gives us a lot of targeted information about where these groups live and who these groups are. So essentially what we've tried to do is lay out the predictions in terms of climate, where it's headed, which is not a surprise to anybody. We've identified the populations, but what can we do? It seems like such an enormous question. Can we make an impact? How do we flatten the environmental curve while at the same time creating a more equitable and social environment? So we believe, at KCCAN, our team, that there are several key strategies that can help to balance these scales. We're going to show you a short little clip about KCCAN. It is not fully edited, and it wasn't ready to go quite yet, but I think it still does a good job to at least highlight some of the solutions we believe can be implemented to achieve both sustainability and justice. You'll see in the video, hopefully you'll see in the video, our emphasis on education, which is primary for us, our commitment to long-term employment support of vulnerable populations and people that we're working with. Our targeted climate action is food waste. We're trying to provide a service to coffee shops, restaurants, sort of that middle market, not huge, giant producers of food waste, and not residential necessarily for us, but large producers. Our residential, facilities or high-rise facilities, condos, people like that, and then businesses. The other thing we're pushing quite a bit, and hopefully you'll see a little bit of it in this video also, is leadership development, and our community collaboration is key for us. So we'll just go ahead and play this real short video. We can here.
To full screen, there we go.
KCCAN Compost is an innovative social and environmental enterprise here in Kansas City, focusing on waste diversion through composting, specifically in commercial businesses, while also providing internships and jobs for our homeless community here in Kansas City.
The KCCAN compost program is actually very easy. It's very easy to implement the things that go into the compost, which is actually anything that came from the earth, we actually put back into the cans to go back into the earth. Gotta remember to put the lid down.
Right now, we pay for our trash to be picked up by the pound, and by partnering and composting, what we're finding is that our costs for the trash is actually going to go down, and we're actually going to save money. It's an easy program. It's easy to train. People get behind it, and it's good for the environment and everyone around us.
So I challenge everyone to join me at KCCAN Compost for the composting movement here in our area.
My first interview. Yeah! Well, my position is documenting the waste and barrels that we have that is put into our truck. Operating our machine is very simple. I am very proud of working with the compost people. It gives me a chance to see where all this waste is going and what it will do for the environment, and where do I fit in to help it.
Kansas City Canned Compost has been a wonderful blessing in my life. It helped me gain mobility in my life for us moving forward and grabbing hold to what it feels to be responsible. Kansas City Compost have also showed me a lot of different safety techniques with driving big rigs. I never drove a truck like this before, so they walked with me step by step, got me the tools I need to get the test, passed the test, and now I'm here sitting in the truck driving for Kansas City Canned Compost.
Please compost for us. Our future depends on you. KC Can Compost! KC Can Compost!
KC Can Compost. We got this.
Okay. So we believe there's a lot going on in that video, but we have a model for change that we follow, and it kind of goes through these 4 different aspects of it. And one of the key components for us really is education. That's why every time we set up a business or organization with food waste collection services, we meet with their employees to conduct a training to explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. Why are we collecting food waste? So many people don't really understand that purpose. Well, when we send it to the landfill, as many of you know, it breaks down in an anaerobic environment, and it creates methane gas, a very potent greenhouse gas, which contributes to climate change and many other serious issues. If instead we divert that food waste from the landfill to be made into compost, we create so many benefits. We reduce greenhouse gas emissions, decrease the need for fertilizers and pesticides. We improve air quality, water quality, soil quality, plant health, and food nutrition. And we actually reverse climate change. We make sure that employees understand why diverting food waste matters and how they're making a real impact when they choose to compost. We actually provide a diversion report to every business each month so they can see their direct environmental impact. And we also explain that not only are we making an environmental impact, but with their help, we're also providing meaningful employment opportunities in a safe learning environment for our team members who have experienced firsthand social and employment barriers. In addition to providing employee education for our customers, we have also received the 2020 EPA Environmental Justice Grant. And with the EPA's support, we've created a green employment training program specifically for individuals facing significant barriers to employment, such as former homelessness or incarceration. The program focuses on environmental literacy, work readiness, and soft skills training. The curriculum strengthens students' academic and professional skills. It improves their environmental literacy, and it prepares them to become community leaders. Students are presented with the tools they need to enter living wage environmental jobs, and they're empowered to improve conditions in their communities. Completion of the program results in an industry relevant certificate, individual employment plan and career growth strategy, and valuable field experience. So students receive ongoing counseling and case management during the program and after its completion to support their long-term success. Last fall, we piloted an abridged version of this program with formerly homeless individuals who were receiving services at Shelter KC, and they provided tremendously positive feedback at the end of it. They showed a lot of enthusiasm for the information and reported that they enjoyed learning about so many different environmental issues and how they could make a positive difference. They were really shocked at what they discovered, and they really wanted to change their personal behaviors and believed that pursuing green employment would be rewarding for them. So all of them demonstrated a strong desire to complete the program in its entirety, and we plan to launch the program in its entirety and open it up for enrollment to the Kansas City community later this summer once we pass this COVID crisis.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Another major component that hopefully you saw highlighted in our film a little bit is the integration of our social support program. So combating poverty, restoring dignity are, as we mentioned, I mean, they're big, overwhelming tasks, seemingly. But we are seeing it is possible. It requires, in our opinions, it requires a really realistic, long view approach. The short-term approaches to our social issues are not working, they're not effective. We're seeing that. Providing housing or 40-hour-a-week job to someone who's been living on the streets for years and years, you know, seems like a good idea on the outset, but a job and house may not be the underlying cause of their homelessness. I often use the example of roller skating, ice skating, something like that. If you have never ice skated and you get out there on the rink, you know, you're gonna get blisters, your ankles are gonna turn in and out, and you're gonna fall quite a bit. And we have to understand that recovering from anything takes time and needs to be done in a slow and very compassionate way. And so our view is that the community, we have to create innovative opportunities that realistically build someone's capacity for work, while at the same time gradually growing their ability to manage money and time and responsibilities. There needs to be an environment to grow confidence, I think. And so creating employment opportunities that support these people very, very specifically and gradually, we've seen as being very effective. Our hope is to create that environment for them, and to be aware and supportive of their needs. Environmental piece of our strategy here and sustainability component, obviously it's the food waste, but what's so amazing about this, I think you heard in the video, both Joseph and Anne mentioned, they are so proud to be doing the work they're doing. And it's dignified work. They're helping the community. And when they understand that, it's empowering for them. And so that's another just added piece to the combination of what we're trying to do in terms of equity and environment together. Another big component to our vision and program is leadership. Heather mentioned it just a minute ago, but actively encouraging and supporting the development of leadership skills and people in leadership that maybe typically have not had that opportunity. So we've been very committed to this and have various voices on our board of directors, which guide us. One of our board members in particular, who's dealt with homelessness personally, currently works at Shelter KC. It's amazing what he brings to our board meetings, because he has a vision and an understanding, an empathy, a compassion for what we're trying to achieve, but he's able to articulate that in a way to us that's incredibly powerful, and that really, you know, no other voices on the board at this point can speak to the issues as deeply and empathetically as he can. So it's very powerful for us, but it's also powerful to him and the community that he can go back in and basically bring a message and become a leader within that community. So we just feel like fostering and encouraging the leadership is a really important piece to all this.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And a final component to our model for change really emphasizes collaboration. As you may well know, community collaboration and partnerships can be powerful tools. We can accomplish so much more together than separately. We're fortunate to have a variety of supporters like Mid-America Regional Council Solid Waste Management District, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources, EPA, William T. Kemper Foundation, and UMKC's Midwest Center for Nonprofit Leadership. We've developed strong partnerships with Missouri Organic and Canby's Markets, as well as many community leaders like the ones that are shown here. The Nelson Atkins Museum, Kemper Museum, John Knox Village Retirement Community, Holiday Montessori, Oddly Correct, Balmaeus, Shelter KC, City Union Mission, so many more, all of whom not only support our environmental efforts, but our efforts to provide meaningful jobs, internships, and opportunities to those with significant social barriers. If you want more information about us, please check out our website at www.kccancompost.com, or you can follow us on Instagram at kccancompost. And I would just say, for the greener good, we ask that you join us by donating, volunteering, or supporting our partner organizations we have displayed. Together we can make a difference, and we can provide environmental and social justice for everyone in our community. And if now we'd like to answer any questions you may have, we'll give everyone a couple of moments. I saw a few questions come in while we were talking, so let's check into that. Kristan, my screen is not showing my questions right now, so let me go back to this. And
I don't see any questions either.
Let's see. Okay, here they are. First one that popped up says, how many are you employing, and do you track the CO2 footprint of your compost pickup trucks? I love that question about the CO2 footprint of our compost pickup trucks, because I've always wondered that too. The truck we have right now runs off of gas and not diesel, so we like that, but we would prefer it run off of something else that's even greener. Yeah, eventually that is our goal and our dream, that it would run off of food waste, but we're not quite there yet. And as far as how many are we currently employing, we only have about 4 that we're currently employing and giving internships to. There's been a slight pause, as you may imagine, with dealing with coronavirus. So, but we are hoping that once we get past this hump, like everyone else, we'll be able to continue ramping up and bringing in more people under our wings. Next question, Kristan, if you can't see it, says, how many customers are using your compost service? So I would estimate that we have about 35, 30, somewhere in there. Again, we've kind of put things on hold a little bit. We just launched last May, but we have quite a few in the pipeline, probably about 45 sitting in the pipeline that are just waiting for us to come in and do waste analyses and stuff like that and set them up. But, you know, obviously with all the social distancing and people not being oftentimes in the office right now, we're just kind of waiting. Kristan, do you have anything to add to that, or?
No, we're just in a position with everybody else in the country trying to figure out how to pivot and be able to support people who still want to be composting at this time. Obviously, a lot of the restaurants are down to very bare bones as well. But I think we're seeing a little bit of an uptick in apartment dwellers, condo dwellers that have been coming in. So we're looking at more ways to sort of Zoom and educate them, which we do require before we start with any sort of business or group, via Zoom. So we're still trying to figure out how to keep moving forward in the midst of all this.
Yeah, definitely. And one more says, what do you do with the compost? So actually we partner with Missouri Organic. We take all of the food waste at this time to Missouri Organic to be turned into compost. So that's their part of it. I think big picture dream for us is we would like to have our own compost site, but that's a little ways down the way. We have other dreams and visions too, Kristan, if you want to chime in with that, because it is kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah, lots of vision here with this organization. This whole idea, when I started with the background of it, really began with the idea of working with compost as being a very therapeutic space, vermiculture being a potentially very therapeutic space for people to work. So that is part of the vision, is to expand how we're able to help people and the environment at the same time. So that clearly, if we can continue to grow our vision and business and community engagement and support, we'd be able to open those jobs up to all sorts of different types of vulnerable communities. Or we've been, some people reached out from that have autism and have an interest in working in that. So there's different types of ways I really see this business being able to fulfill both missions.
Another question, which I think is great, and it's a little long, but just bear with me. It just says, is part of your mission to reach a vision where there is less food waste being produced? That is the overall goal of a food system change, I would think, reduced overall natural resources waste, and wondering how your model will adjust in the future. So great question. The EPA does have a hierarchy of food recovery, and compost is actually lower on the scale for food recovery. There are other more important ways to impact reducing food waste overall, or what you do with it. So the first one is reducing food waste, and it is very key for us to get in there and talk to people. People just don't realize how much food waste they're actually producing. And oftentimes we will go into an organization and ask them, and they're like, we really have no idea. And they're very surprised once we get them set up and running, how much is being thrown out. What's been really awesome is that going into these organizations and setting them up with a service, a lot of them are learning how they can order better, so they don't have to throw product out that may have gone bad. So there's less consumption there. They're also learning how to plate better, so they aren't putting as much on the plate when they find, customers aren't really eating everything they're putting on there. They're throwing it out. So those are ways that we've helped inform and educate in reducing food waste overall. But yeah, that's an excellent, it's the first tier for EPA and it makes the most sense. And last question here is there a way to supply a neighborhood in a block by block manner with food waste bins? We typically have dealt with high-rise apartments and condos instead of sort of a curbside pickup. Kristan, do you want to take this, or do you?
No, go ahead. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, so we've focused on that because we're really concerned about urban dwellers having access to composting abilities. A lot of times they don't have backyards or patios or anything like that. So that's been our focus and our market. We have partnered with Compost Collective KC, which does a curbside pickup. So they are on the Missouri side and parts of Kansas as well. We have kind of stuck to the bigger food waste producers because it's made more sense for our model. And that's what Kristan was talking about earlier when she said we kind of came in the middle market. We really had a key market we were trying to hit. So we have not ventured into that land quite yet, or I don't know if it will happen for us in the future, but Kristan, anything you want to add to?
No, it's just there's two other organizations in Kansas City and Jackson County working very effectively in their zones, and Missouri Organic is obviously one of them. They're bigger and manage waste scale, like harvesters or things like that, which we're not trying to manage. And then Compost Collective just does a great job with their residential collection. So we've got a really nice partnership, and there's a lot of waste. And although whoever asked the first question about getting, higher up in that EPA chart is definitely the goal, where we are right now in the city and as a culture is there's still just a tremendous amount of waste. When we first did our research, we estimated that less than 1% of the commercial market was actually being serviced and composting. So there's a massive, massive amount of waste that needs to be collected, composted, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's all of the questions, and thank you guys so much for joining us today. Again, if you want to engage, check us out at www.kccancompost.com and interact there, or follow us on Instagram at kccancompost, and we hope to hear from you soon. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.